All right, so 7:02 p.m. I see that we have a quorum of planning board members. I'd like to make a motion to open the meeting for this evening.
Second.
Thank you for the second. So I will go roll call vote. Addie Mae Weiss is aye. Steph Harrison
Aye.
and Rob Wolf,
Aye.
Jim Garino,
Aye.
and Frank Cook.
Aye.
Oh, sorry guys, too many things going on here. Okay, so the agenda that was posted for tonight is we are opening the meeting and we don't have any minutes for tonight. We have a continuation of the zoning bylaw updates for town meeting for 7:15 p.m. And then if it's not too late, there's the kind of running list of items on the agenda: review and discuss warrant articles proposed for town meeting.
An ongoing problem that Addie Mae's been having so far tonight.
Any other further ADU accessory dwelling unit updates from the state and the MBTA zoning bylaw, if there's any update. And then reports and meetings with other boards and entities in the town planner report. Are there any items not anticipated which needed to be added to the agenda? All right. I will make a motion to accept the agenda as posted for this evening's meeting. Do I have a second?
Second.
Okay. Moved, seconded. All in favor of the agenda for this evening. Addie Mae Weiss is aye. Steph Harrison.
Aye.
Rob Wolf.
Aye.
Jim Garino.
Aye.
And Frank Cook.
Aye.
Okay, so given that the hearing continuation is scheduled for 7:15, Heidi, do you want to, and we don't have anything else specifically, do you want to go ahead and give any town planner report?
You're muted, Heidi.
Thanks. So keeping up with the ADU bylaws, there are some towns, Natick in particular, that had passed an ADU bylaw back in the fall. It has not been reviewed by the Attorney General's office yet, so I did look online, but it's not, I don't know how valid theirs is going to be because the regulations came out after they've had their town meeting vote. So the regulations I just forwarded are around today. I think that came from EOHLC, the final regulations. I think we're just going to take our time digesting what's going, watch what some other towns are doing, and go through with our initial ADU changes, what we know, and then perfect if we have to going forward for next year, once we see how it's playing out in the state. MBTA overlay district updates. We're hearing from towns that a lot of the grants that they're getting are now tied to MBTA compliance. And even once, if you're applying for grants, you have to find out if you are MBTA compliant. And they will only award if there's extra money to those towns who are not MBTA compliant. So there's definitely still more increasing incentives to approve an MBTA district. So we'll keep up on that. And that's about it for the town planner report.
And by the way, the town of Shrewsbury is having their vote on their MBTA. They've already passed it at their annual town meeting, but today they have a special vote specifically for this initiative. It'll be interesting to see after 8 o'clock what the results are.
Yeah.
Is that a ballot vote or a or a special town meeting, Frank?
It's not a special town meeting. They've had their town meeting, which just passed that. Now they're having a town-wide vote, a special vote for just the MBTA for passing this through the entire town.
And I don't know if there's any other committee reports from Frank or Rob? Jim, Historical Society, anything new going on with them?
Nothing from me.
Dan, Dan and do we have anyone else on from advisory? How are advisory hearings going?
Going along fine. We've had some long meetings, lots of things to talk about. I think looking for warrant articles, including planning board warrant articles, either on February 26th or March 5th. I will figure out a schedule shortly, so I think that's what we have in mind for that. And I think I'm here tonight, and I think Nora is here tonight, just as we're sort of trying to just get educated on, what are some of the articles that'll be coming and so on.
Or I dropped off just for awareness.
Oh, yeah, okay, thanks. Anyways, I'm here to.
Nora's back on.
Coming back in.
Addie Mae, do you want me to do a quick review of what we have right now for the articles?
Sure.
All right, so currently we have 5
Show
articles.
this slide.
Sure. That would be
Okay.
great. So we have our MBTA community one, and then we have a supporting one of the updates through other zoning sections that involve the MBTA overlay district. So the MBTA overlay district will be the complete bylaw that we're adding a whole new section to the zoning bylaws. And then what other impacts are done on a second one. We split them up because if the first one fails, we didn't want to have to try and weed things out and make changes on the second item. So it was just easier to separate. So one passes, we go to the next one. If one fails, then we can skip the second one. The next one we have is our zoning bylaw updates. And currently this includes ADU, building code updates, any other things that have come up that we've noticed that need to be addressed. The fourth one is a sign bylaw update. And that was kind of at the request of some residents to address some concerns they had about signs and what could be done in town. And then the fifth one is floodplain district mandates. And this is something that's from the DCR. The state has mandated us that we need to make some changes and updates to show that our floodplain maps are reflective on what's on the current FEMA maps. And we really don't have any say in that. It's just we have to update our bylaws, and that's why it's a separate one as well. So there's 5 currently, and then tonight there might be discussion on the third one, whether we split that into 2.
I think we may end up with a 3A and a 3B, and I think the sequence on that would matter too. So in terms of how they're presented in the warrant, because they're a bit one. We just
Again, it's
some
when
of them are in terms of how the
Sure.
warrant article gets written. Some of them are one would have to build on the other, assuming
Right.
passage or something.
Right.
So I'm not sure exactly what that would look like, but
Right.
that's for tonight's hearing.
Right. So I don't know if we can discuss it now. I think it's better
Okay.
to wait until the hearing to just so it's for the record of what we choose there. And then Addie Mae, did you want to address any of the public hearing procedures? I think Frank had some.
Yeah,
good-
I guess, we can fall into that and just the general public hearing procedures. Frank reminded us of the kind of some ground rules, norms for our public meetings in general and how we conduct procedures that our most recent town moderator and even before Mary Wolf, Corey Lincoln would always remind us all of our behavior, that we are all neighbors and friends, and that at the end of the day, we all have chosen to live in this town and work together, and that most of us are here volunteering and as elected officials and doing the best job that we can. Frank has provided some reminders that a public hearing is a formal proceeding held in order to receive testimony from all interested parties, including the general public, on proposed issue or action. Those interested in providing testimony, or this would be at at well, we don't do swearing in, but we ask you state your name and your address and before you speak so that we have a record accurately reflecting who spoke. This is allowing any opinions on opposition or to an application or proposal, and basically creates a record upon which a decision maker must make their decision. So the planning board has had lots of meetings and then a lot of deliberations and has come forward with some recommendations, but a hearing allows full public participation. And I think we've had some really good, healthy public participation, and that's been good. And it just is just a general reminder that at the end of the day, we are all neighbors and we want to be able to enjoy being with each other. So that's it. So let's see, 7:13 p.m. technically, 2 more minutes. Frank, is there anything that I left out?
No, I think you pretty well covered it. I wanted to make sure that people understood, and it was probably more for the last meeting than this one. Whereas at a annual town meeting, you go in with pretty much the final warrant article that you want to you know, the town to vote on. Whereas in this stage with a public hearing, we're still looking for input from the public to help and guide us in what changes, what things we should think about, and what we should consider in going forward with the rest of the steps of in this case creating a bylaw or getting a warrant passed, so that there still is time for them to make some decisions, that it's not a fait accompli and then they have to fight really hard to try to convince us otherwise. Whereas it's a conversation and indicating discussion of concerns and impact of how it impacts those particular members and so on. So I think that's, if that is better understood, it would also change maybe the tone and tenor of the way people come into a meeting.
Sounds good. We are at exactly 7:15 p.m. So we can officially reconvene our continued hearing, which was opened last Tuesday, January 28th. And right, that was the 28th, last Tuesday, right? And now here we are, Tuesday, February 4th. And I'm not going to reread the lengthy hearing notice. I did that at the last meeting. It was mailed out to every resident, and it is also posted on the town website. So it should be fairly detailed. I believe we got through maybe a quarter, but at the same time, I think a lot of things that we might have gotten through more than that. I think there's a lot of things that overlap, and a lot of what we have been working on are things that are cleaning up stuff that has been kind of causing headaches for a long time. And so there's a lot more maybe text or verbiage that is being presented that we're looking at, only because there's a lot of things that are just terminology that are repeated throughout our zoning bylaws. And this is, again, kind of just a microcosm of what we realize needs to happen across the board with zoning. Heidi, yes, please.
Just question, I'm not sure, it might be good just to take a vote to continue the hearing.
Oh,
A motion.
okay. To make a motion to continue the hearing. Okay. We made a motion to continue the hearing. I guess, do I need to make a motion to open the continued hearing at 7?
Yes,
Okay, no, I guess technically.
just in case, cover ourselves.
Okay, covering ourselves, making a motion to open the continued hearing from January 28th.
Second.
Okay, moved, seconded, all in favor. Addie Mae Weiss is an aye. Steph Harrison. Rob Wolf.
Aye.
Jim Garino.
Aye.
And Frank Hoke.
Aye.
All right. So I think I know it has been requested by the select board that perhaps planning board could consider separating out the accessory dwelling unit material from the kind of cleanup zoning language parts of the bylaw that we were trying to include as one warrant article. So we are, I think Heidi's done an attempt at trying to pull those parts out and has shared a document with planning board, and I'm trying to think of the best way to present this. I guess, do we just,
It was
it
posted.
was posted, okay.
Yeah.
Right. It was posted to the public, what this could look like. We were trying to go with fewer warrant articles and have it be more of a consent agenda item for for making things cleaner, mostly because we didn't perceive initially that we're not adding a new bylaw. We were introducing terminology that the state has their by right accessory dwelling unit. And at the time we started working on this, we did not have the final language from the state, but we knew that as of February this week, at some point, this was back in October, they were saying sometime in February, as of February 2nd, regardless of what you have as a town, the state bylaw will go into effect. And we needed to have a distinction definition for what we have in our current zoning bylaw for accessory dwelling units versus what the state's bylaw was, in order to have essentially two different types of accessory dwelling units in order not to lose what we call our special permit accessory dwelling unit. So I guess the best way to start is to start with this document that is on the town website and is the attempt to pull out the accessory dwelling unit relevant language.
If I can I say a little bit about the document
Absolutely.
itself? Okay, so what was posted is what I'm going to be screen sharing today. But in the interim, I've had some thoughts about potentially what belongs in an ADU bylaw versus what belongs in the updates bylaw. So as we go, I'm actually going to be proposing to shrink this down even more and move some of these things into the updates bylaw because they originated from confusion from Chris with the building code and open space subdivision and kind of have nothing to do with ADU. So you'll see as we go through, I think I wanted to start here. I'm not going to start at the top of the document because I think it will be clearer for the discussion to start with schedule of use regulations, which is where we have in our current bylaws the term apartment, which is our ADU term. So our current bylaws defines apartment only under schedule of use regulations. And so just to back up a step, it's very clear that like a comprehensive bylaw with ADU in mind would be a good idea. For example, to define ADU in the definitions section of the zoning bylaws. However, this was an attempt at making really minimal changes to accommodate the state law because we knew that the guidance wasn't out and we were just doing this as a quick Band-Aid and that a more comprehensive ADU bylaw down the road would have to be done to become more compliant with future state law guidelines that haven't been shared yet, right? So this was really kind of a minimalist approach to work with what we have with respect to ADUs and make as few changes as possible now, recognizing that once we have guidance in hand, we can go back to this bylaw and go with a fine-tooth comb and make it a little more throughout the zoning bylaws. We didn't
Right,
want
but
to
I
do it
guess-
now and then have to do it again later with that level
So-
of effort.
Yeah, so I think, absolutely, you're right, Steph, but I also think to a degree, sort of like many things that the state's mandating, that we are referencing the state, this new special permanent accessory dwelling unit. I don't think in the future we won't be writing a new bylaw necessarily. We will just be incorporating references to the state's zoning bylaw. I mean, it's the state zoning bylaw will be separate. So, like, if anyone was to say, well, why don't we just wait? It won't make a lot of changes, I don't think, in what we have for our special permit. And then as far as the protected use, the state's got their language, and we're just referring, we would operate under what the state bylaw says. Am I completely
Okay.
wrong? I mean, I just want, I know people will often say like, well, let's not, you guys don't, you don't have enough information. So why are you trying to go ahead with something you don't know anything about? But that's not the situation here. We just didn't have the specific state language, but it doesn't change much. We're basically keeping what we have as one, a special permit ADU, and introducing the term protected use, and that's then they'll refer to the state's version.
Some of our discussions, though, about like definitions and defining a principal dwelling unit versus an accessory dwelling unit have been, let's defer and see when the state guidelines come out. So I guess I'm a little bit confused. So I think there are some things that may come up today where it seems like it makes sense to do something, but we may not have a slate of definitions at this time that we necessarily want to switch it to right now.
Actually, yeah, I think, Chris, could you speak to that? Because I think you could clarify that. I think it's stuff you just hit the nail on the head. It's that some of our definitions might change. It's not necessarily the bylaw, but Chris, go ahead.
That's
Please.
fair.
Yeah, actually, the state did put forth the final version of the ADU specific CMR that covers how we are supposed to deal with these protected use accessory dwelling units. I mean, so we now have that language, which is basically exactly
We
what
got it at like 4 o'clock this afternoon.
Yes,
so
right.
I haven't
It came
digested
on
it.
like Sunday. So I mean, it's brand new, but it is out. But I think you're right. Our bylaw hadn't really integrated the concept of what an ADU was very well. I think the apartment was kind of an amended version of a previous thing that also sort of spun off of the idea of I think what do we call it, a housekeeping unit. Anyway, a lot of the stuff that we have is antiquated and doesn't speak to this new world that we live in, where we've got this state defined term, and I think we're doing everything that we can to try to bring the bylaw to be in line with this. But I think, like you said, it's going to be multiple steps to get there. If you wanted to do a complete rewrite that sort of takes into account the concepts and the definitions that the state has just given us, I think that's a bigger project than anybody on this board is prepared to deal with right now. But what we're doing as far as these new definitions and new entries in the table of use do pretty well correspond exactly to what the state has put out there. So I think we're doing stuff that's not going to have to get deleted later. It will probably be added on and fine tuned, but I think that the basic stuff that you're adding now is going to carry forward. So I wouldn't be too afraid of these kind of changes that you're proposing.
Okay. I know we've gotten kind of, I unfortunately, I think I spun things a little bit up into the weeds there. But before I guess, luckily anyone watching is able to see what we're talking about here. And I think if you read it, it's pretty straightforward, but I know Marion's had a raised hand. So Marion, if you'd like to say something, please do.
Oh, thanks, Eddie Mae. I appreciate, everything that everyone has said here. It's all right. I think that the fact that the state has pretty clear language out now gives you enough to work on, and you've already done quite a bit of work on this. I'm thinking only about how it's going to go down at town meeting. And I really think that burying it in, just definitions or, housekeeping updates could get you into big trouble at town meeting, because enough is known about this, enough word is going around about it, that people may not be happy with it just being taken as a minor redefining or housekeeping updates here and there. And I think, given the fact that you have a pretty good framework already in hand, and the state has had that kind of overall framework pretty much in hand, there are details to add for sure. And given the fact that it can be changed at future town meetings, I personally think it would be wise, I'm speaking only for myself, Marion Neutra, incidentally, 25 Prospect Street, sorry. Speaking for myself, I think you'd be wise to make this a separate warrant article, because it's so much easier to explain as a separate article. If it's buried in housekeeping, it really, you get into the weeds just trying to explain it. Whereas if it's a separate article, I think it stands on its own. And the warrant could be updated at this point. It's not closed forever right now. I think it will be just so much easier for you to handle and for the town to understand if you give it space as a separate article at town meeting. It's just my opinion.
Yeah.
Thanks.
So Addie
Yeah,
Mae, is it okay if I
Yeah,
actually start with the
Yes.
things that I'm proposing to move out of the ADU bylaw?
Yes, Deb, I was just gonna recommend that you walk us through, because we have this document. I think I think there's enough interest in separating out kind of just
Okay.
the ADU specific, and Steph, if you want to walk us through kind of what we have here that we've separated out, and then what
Yes.
things were kind of in the quick rush to try and pull everything out, after a second review, we realized that actually they really do belong in the update warrant
Sure.
article.
Okay. Okay. So the heart of the ADU is to change our apartment to be called a special permit ADU. And then to add another use, which is 2A for the schedule of uses, which is a protected use ADU. And this is the state's terminology, protected use. So that's really what this does. And then everything else around it is definitions to accommodate these new terms and things like that. The thing that you can see my notes over on the right side here. What you see on the left is what was posted, but I have notes on the right so that we can all be on the same page. We had a multi-dwellings, which was number 26. And Chris Canny pointed out that well, in addition to the open space subdivision allowing for duplexes, and we don't have a duplex definition in the zoning bylaws. In addition to that, Chris Canny had pointed out that two-family dwellings or duplexes are treated differently in the building code. So having a separate designation for a two-family dwelling would align with the building code. So this, I believe, actually belongs in updates instead of in ADU, because it's not related at all to ADUs. So my hope is to just actually move these live while we're talking, because we have to have a document at the end that reflects the discussion. So I will apologize up front for this, but I'm going to go cut this. Whoops, I missed some of it somehow. I'm going to cut this, and I'm going to go into the updates minus ADU section and go to the 3.2 schedule of use and add in 26 and 26A here. Okay, so I've just cut and pasted. Now I'm deleting my comment. And then back to the ADU warrant article. Likewise, in the table, 26 and 26A would go back into the updates warrant article, along with the two footnotes that are related to them. So the double asterisk, which allows for multi-dwellings in EA or in MOD, Chapter 3A. We're going to leave this reference in, and if Chapter 3A doesn't pass, it's just a blank section. So I think that was the thinking, that we could just have them be somewhat independent. So I'm going to move these lines out of this table and into this ZBL section down here. And I'm going to move the whole footnote section over as well. So let me delete my flag here. Because we actually talked about these in the last hearing,
Right.
these changes.
Right.
Hold on, so then the whole footnote section gets moved over because there's no footnote changes.
Related to ADU, correct.
And yes, so ZBL section, so the whole footnote change gets moved over. Okay, and then also in ADU, special requirements. So this one, I'm going to show you what it is in the current bylaw because it's just easier to see. So it's this F section, number and location of dwellings on one lot. The number and locations of dwellings on any one lot shall be such that every dwelling thereon can be provided with sufficient land to form a separate lot, which will itself be in full conformity to the regulations of the section. So basically that says if you add an ADU, you have to have enough land for 2 units in your zoning, in your base zoning, right? And I think there was just like not even an understanding that this was in here and that it's maybe wasn't how it was intended to be from our best guess perspective as a planning board. So I think, you know, fixing this code. So first of all in here, there's some redundant text. So I am going to delete this line of text because it is completely redundant with the line below it. And deleting this without a strike through makes the Word document match the code that we have on file right now. So I'm going to do that right now in real time. So this now reads as the code is online. And the suggestion here is that it kind of gets to the whole idea of a principal dwelling unit. The number and locations of dwellings the number and locations of dwellings excluding ADUs, apartments, and housekeeping units with approved permits on one lot so it's more like a principal dwelling. That is what shall be such that each dwelling has enough land area to be in full conformity itself. So instead of saying number and location of dwellings, including accessory buildings, which could include an ADU, right? We're saying excluding ADUs. So kind of changing this text a little bit.
Does Chris,
And then
I was gonna say, does Chris have any comments on that? I think it was,
I love this.
okay,
Please more. Yes.
okay. And then also clarifying that multi-dwellings in residence EA, but also open space subdivisions. So I didn't mean to go through all of this for potential approval. I meant to go through this to say that it has nothing to do with ADUs and we should talk about it in the updates bylaw and not in the ADU bylaw. So if I move it now and we don't talk about this now, but we come back to it when we get to it in updates. Marion, do you still have a question before I do that?
But no, when you get back to it, I'll ask my question.
Okay. So section 4.3, I'm now going to delete and go over to the updates section minus, what did I say, 4.3? Was that 4.3? I think it was 4.3. See if, let me paste it in and see what happens. Yes, okay. Okay, so now, that is now here where we haven't discussed it yet. It's following where we're picking up, like we're picking up today's hearing where we stopped yesterday, which is up here somewhere. So we'll get to it in the progression of talking about the updates bylaw. So now back to the ADU warrant article. It's very simple. It's just taking our ADU and breaking it into special permit ADU, which is larger than protected use, but less than 1,200 square feet, and then protected use ADU, which is as defined by the state, which includes 1,200 square feet, under 900 square feet and under. So this is the crux of the bylaw. as well as the table of use regulations. Oh, and this needs to all be highlighted and italicized because that's all
Yep.
all added. And then above this, the rest of the bylaw is about modifying definitions that are related. So it's single family home, it's multi-dwelling, housekeeping unit, dwelling unit, and so we're going kind of backwards now. So I guess, Addie Mae, would you like
Wanna
to
walk
start
us
with?
through? I'll let you
Sorry?
you can keep going because I think you've got your hand on the wheel there and been great.
So let's dig in here a little bit. We used to have an apartment. We're changing it to special permit ADU, but we're saying formally apartments because we don't know where in a drawing somewhere something's going to be labeled as an apartment, and we might need to know what that is. We sized it from 900 to 1,200 square feet. Again, maybe back to what it used to say might be helpful. 3.2, number 2. Number 2. So it used to say apartment, and it was defined as a single family detached dwelling together with accessory buildings containing in the dwelling or in an accessory building one additional housekeeping unit. Which we found a little confusing. So we have one additional dwelling unit accessory to a single family home, which is defined up here. We'll get to that in a second, or we can look at it now. Together in a within a single family home, contained within the home or in an accessory building. That's the definition now. Provided, and we didn't change 1 through 7, we only changed number 8. And it's about short-term rentals, and the term Airbnb we kind of removed systematically because there's so many of them now. So this is really just saying, instead of saying not be rented for terms of more than 30 days, whether through Airbnb or similar service or directly, blah, blah, blah. We simplified that to such unit may only be rented or licensed for occupancy for terms of more than 30 days. So that's what we did to the special permit. And then the protected use, ADU, allowed in all districts, and we just copied the state language here and added the same short-term rental prohibition. Any comments on how we define special permit ADU versus protected use ADU?
There is one thing that I think some people may be confused by, which is somewhere where we're talking about multi-dwellings, we mentioned that it's 3 or more units, and that does not include ADUs or special permit ADUs in the count. But there's no language like that in a duplex. So we want it to be clear to people that a single family dwelling plus either kind of ADU is still considered a single family dwelling, and it's not a duplex.
So the single family home is defined here as a single family detached dwelling together with protected use and special permit ADUs. Accessory buildings, garages, etc. So we did define the single family home as being inclusive of ADUs.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I'm just wondering if, I mean, I think that's fine because, you know, the board and the building inspector knows what's going on. It's just if somebody had sort of jumped to the duplex, they could then get a little confused by that.
I mean, that may be, but we're trying to use kind of standard building code language and not, again, a bylaw, not, I think some of the reason why throughout the years, our zoning bylaw has had housekeeping units and apartments and all sorts of kind of varying definitions is sometimes an attempt to explain things, but that are not standardized. So this,
And it is definitely confusing. We had this discussion with Chris in a prior discussion where, you know, duplex is a single structure for dwelling by two families. That could be a single family home with an ADU as it is in the building code, right? Like a building code would treat a single family dwelling unit with an ADU attached to it in the same structure as a duplex.
Yeah, that's where we're gonna run into challenges, and it's gonna be like this across the state, where our zoning definition of what a two-family is or a single family with an ADU is sort of in conflict with the building code's definition, and there's nothing we can do about it, just because obviously the state has given us this this new law, and it is what it is. They're saying a single family house with an ADU is not, for zoning purposes, intended to be a two-family dwelling. It's intended to be a single family plus ADU. So I mean, I think you're on the right track with all of this. And if you want to make a note in the new definition of two-family dwelling that this is not a single family dwelling with an ADU, you could certainly put something like that in there.
Can you say that again, Chris?
In the new definition of two-family dwelling, you
Yeah.
could add something to clarify that a two-family dwelling, what are we saying, is, what is it? I don't see the description. A single structure intended for dwelling by two families, not
not a single family.
not a single family dwelling with protected use or special permitted ADU, something like that would potentially direct the user of this bylaw to see, okay, a single family plus an ADU is not a two-family dwelling, at least
So,
for zoning purposes.
So maybe you got, right now, we've got single structure intended for dwelling by two families, maybe comma, distinguished or
distinct from or
distinct something from a single family with a protected use.
Or either protected.
Marion, what are you thinking?
With either protected
With an
use
ADU.
or special permitted ADU.
with a single ADU, right? That's the dual.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter, like either ADU, right?
Right.
And because remember, this is in updates, so this is not where we've defined protected use ADU. So if ADU doesn't pass, this has to stand alone.
Right.
But I guess my question to you, Chris, then is that I thought you said that the building code would treat a single family home with a single ADU as a duplex.
Yes, it will. And there's nothing we can do about that.
So
But-
can we say like for zoning purposes, this does not include or something like that? Because otherwise we're
if you want
contradicting
to, I mean,
ourselves.
it is the zoning bylaw, so I mean, I think it's pretty clear that we're
Mhm.
really only talking about zoning. But this is kind of where that new 760 CMR is trying to make that distinction of what is a single family versus what is a two family. And it's still the state's language still points you towards multiple dwellings in one structure get treated like it's a two-family dwelling by the building code, even though again they're saying for zoning purposes it's not that. It's confusing, and it's one of those things where I don't think there's a great way to make it not be a little bit confusing.
I don't know if we
Marion,
should clarify anything right now based on this ambiguity. I think we should leave it how we had it, and leave it open to Chris to enforce building codes.
I don't think there's anything wrong with what this new language does. I don't think it would, I don't.
Rob, do you think that helps make a clarifying point for somebody that's sort of looking at the bylaw, wondering what they can do?
I guess, although personally, I would find it more clear if it was more along the lines of what I thought you were originally suggesting, which is just if it said something like single structure intended for dwelling by two families, period. And then maybe just have something like note, a single family home with an ADU is still considered a single family home and not a duplex for the purposes of zoning. That's extremely clear.
That works for me.
What did you say, Rob? Say it again.
I would say just single structure intended for dwelling by two families, period. Note, a single family home with a single ADU
Is that what you said?
is not considered a two-family dwelling for the purpose of set.
I think you just cut it off after dwelling.
Is not a duplex, yeah.
Well, it is considered it in the building code, right?
Yeah.
Yes. So I mean, I don't mind that for the purpose of zoning. Just to be very clear.
Make it a little bigger, Rob. I see you.
Marion, since the two-family dwelling duplex, the reason that we really need to update our zoning bylaws and include this because of open space subdivision bylaw language. Is there something you'd like to add to this conversation?
Yeah, a couple things. I'm wondering whether, well, I'm remembering a discussion that we had, Rob and Heidi and I were all at the Metro West Regional meeting last week. And a couple of issues came up there that were discussed that I think are relevant here. One is that the advice from the MAPC people regarding ownership was that an ADU can't be separate ownership from the single family home because basically you can't have a separate deed on the same property for a separate structure. At least my understanding was that the bottom line is that an ADU would not be separate ownership. It would be rented, although I'm not sure that's clear in your bylaw. And the other point is that a duplex, I have to ask Chris, is a duplex by definition two adjoined single-family homes under separate ownership, or not necessarily? One can be rented.
And not necessarily. I guess it would be anything where the two units are where neither one of them is less than 1,200 square feet would kind of be the thing. Where it might potentially fall under an ADU. But no, there's no ownership requirement for zoning purposes for the two family.
Okay, then the other thing is that another question came up about how many ADUs can be attached to one single family home or associated with one single family home. And the answer was quite clearly only one by state law. But then the question arose, if there's already one grandfathered special permit ADU associated with a single family home, and the owner comes in and says, well, I have the right to put in a second by right ADU or protected use ADU, would that be allowed?
So there
And-
is.
Oh,
I
go ahead.
believe the answer is yes, right?
Yeah. So the direction that we've been getting from the sort of building inspector side of the world has been, yes, this new law would essentially allow a second protected use ADU to be constructed on the lot that already has a specially permitted ADU. Now, we could write something into the bylaw to potentially not allow that, or at least going forward to say, let's say you wanted to just have a specially permitted one, and then you said, okay, well, I've built my specially permitted one. Now I'm going to come in for my protected use one. Potentially, we could try to say that you can't do that. But we don't get to like retroactively count the the existing special permitted ones as protected, right? They don't like automatically flip over and become like, oh, you already have a protected use one because you have this old special permitted one. So we're kind of stuck with like the door opens, everybody gets a protected use ADU, regardless of whether they have an existing special permitted one. And there's a section of this new state law that talks about that, where it's, you know, special permits for multiple ADUs on the same lot. And it essentially just says if the town allows specially permitted ADUs on the same lot as a protected use, then there's no issue. And that's kind of what our bylaw is going to be saying. Obviously, the zoning board issues a special permit for the ones that are would be like the third unit, I guess. So they have some discretion. They could say no, I suppose, if they felt that it was inappropriate.
Right, and then I guess we had some discussions on this. The reality is there's not that many existing special permitted ADUs throughout town. There's a handful, and at the end of the day, adding an ADU, whether it's by right or it's a special permit ADU, you still need to have this capacity with your septic to
Right.
to be able to add that unit.
Is it worth saying somewhere in your updated bylaw that only one ADU is allowed, only one ADU created after such and such a date when this passes town meeting is allowed per single family home? Because I don't see anything against adding that. And I think, you know, knowing what's maybe coming down the road, it might be wise to at least try to put that into the bylaw as an explicit statement, even if it's just repeating what the state says.
Yeah, I think the tricky part is if you put it on we can't apply that to the protected use ones because they're protected.
Right, only under special permit,
Right.
right?
So we can only apply it to the special permitted type ADUs. And I guess you run into the problem of if you want to have a protected use, you're still granted a protected use. You like, you know, the whatever special permitted one doesn't count as a protected use. So I think no matter what you do, the state law kind of trumps the our ability to say you can only have one.
But I think
Okay.
that's a good point, because if you were to add a protected use onto a special permit, we're saying there's only a handful of those in town where
Right.
you can do that, right? But if you were to add a special permit onto a protected use, that could be an infinite number of properties that have not designated their protected use one yet,
Right.
right? So we could add under special permit, special permits will not be granted for properties already containing an ADU or something like that.
Yeah,
Yeah.
you could do that. And also, I think it wasn't clear before to me that a builder couldn't propose to add 3 or 4 protected use ADUs on one property, but apparently state law allows one.
Right.
Correct. Okay. So that's somewhat reassuring. And then, you know, protected use ADUs are, I mean, special permit ADUs are under the control of the planning board finally, so.
So does this language work then? Homes is, I'm struggling with that. We call it a single family home here.
Yeah, I would say single family homes would be consistent.
Or dwellings.
Dwellings, yeah, that's better.
I think our bylaw calls them homes, though.
Yeah,
I think it's homes.
Oh,
Yeah.
okay, whatever.
Right.
Yeah, single family home.
I think it
So
just
special
needs to be
permits-
explicit when you can be.
A special permit ADU will not be allowed for single-family homes already containing any ADU.
Mhm.
It's good.
And then where does it say that a special permit, a protected use ADU, or one protected use ADU is allowed per property?
Right here where I've highlighted,
Oh, right, okay, thank you.
and that's state language.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, I had a couple of thoughts on this. After our last meeting, I was wondering if we could somehow finesse this whole thing by saying, look, only one ADU per property. We'd almost get rid of our concept of the special permit ADU entirely and just say that, we have something that corresponds to the state, except since we've been allowing up to 1,200 square feet so far. I was thinking, I wonder if we could just say protected use ADUs are allowed to be up to 1,200 feet instead of up to 900. But it's pretty clear in the state regs you can't do that. It's specifically limited to 900 square feet or the lesser of 900 square feet or half the square footage of the primary dwelling. So you couldn't do that. So if you're still going to allow 1,200 square feet, you have to have another category of thing. And I have noticed that we have effectively changed that a little bit, because in the existing bylaw, the apartment can be up to 1,200 square feet. And I believe the way we've written the change, as we've turned it into a special permit ADU, is we've said it has to be more than 900 square feet and up to 1,200.
Yeah.
So
It is written that way, meaning
I'm just going to.
if you're going to do under 900, make that your protected use one.
You have to. You cannot.
Mhm.
We're saying we won't give a special permit for it. I'm just going to throw out another idea, which is probably a bad idea, and we probably shouldn't do it. But just if there is some concern about having two ADUs on a lot of properties, so that somebody, if they want to put on two ADUs, they can, in the future, they can't do it if they build the protected one first, but they can do it if they build the special permit one first, because then we can't stop them from doing a protected one. If we wanted to do that, we could just eliminate the apartment and special permit ADUs from the zoning entirely and just say, oh, we're just going to allow the state type of ADUs. Of course, any ADUs that exist, any apartments that exist today are grandfathered in, just aren't under consideration. But going forward, you only get to build protected use ADUs, and you get to build one of them per dwelling, and that's it.
Well, that would be, I think that'd be a totally different conversation to basically strike. You'd be basically striking down what we have in our existing zoning completely. And I think there was a good effort to increase to 1,200 square feet. But I think the planning board would like to maintain some sense of review process on units that are 1,200 square feet. So I think the language, I mean, Rob, I think you brought up a good point, and I think the new language that was just inserted as item 8 or 9 by staff kind of addresses the primary concern of having lots of multiple ADUs on properties, and we only have a few that are already in existence, and so there might be a few, if they've got the land and they've got the septic, it's not going to be a huge impact, but I think we've addressed what we can for going forward with the new line that was just written.
I can't raise my hand, sorry, when I'm sharing screens and I've got 800 things going on here. I like literally can't find the button. I'm sure it's in my hidden controls that I don't want covering up my screen over here. But the other thing that we have discussed when we've had similar conversations in planning board meetings in the past is that, you know, the special permits for the ADUs or for the apartments, as they were termed, are specifically designated to be renewable for up to 4 years. So the whole point of this was that you permit it for 4 years, but you're also requiring that special permit to be renewed so that you can make sure that the building is upkept and kept up and et cetera, like to code and, you know, safe and all those other things. Like there's, you know, it's at the discretion of the planning board to allow for the continued rental of those on a 4-year cycle. So if we just eliminate this language, then there's these existing 1,200 square foot apartments that don't have a permit.
Well, they would have
After-
whatever their original permit was, which has a condition on it that they have to renew it every so often.
Right, but if this whole apartment section goes away, then
Right, all right, can they
On
even
what-
be renewed? That's the question, I guess.
right,
Yeah.
right.
Um,
I guess I
So there, I mean, and I do think that people you know, people appreciate the ability to build an ADU that's bigger than 900 square feet. Even if not all the families have done it. I think there's,
yeah, that was a popular change when we went from 800 to 1,200. That was an important change for a lot of people that wanted to have, you know, extended family living on site.
Mhm. Yeah, well, if we're not,
You know-
you know, if we're not worried about it, we're not worried about it. I'm just saying it's kind of odd that if it's like we have a concern about, we seem like we don't want people to have 2 ADUs, but there's no way we can prevent that as written, as long as they do them in the correct order.
well, if we get this language passed, anyone that doesn't have an ADU will not be able to have two, based on
Yes,
this
they will.
line. So
Yeah,
They
they-
absolutely will.
they could do the special permit one first at 1,200 square feet and then go for a protected use.
oh, okay.
They
Well,
just can't do it in the other order.
I just don't see that. I mean, I guess I think for this town meeting, I'd like to. We've got a lot of really good changes, and I don't want to throw the baby out with the bathwater because we're worried about everything that could possibly happen in the future. We can go back next year if all of a sudden we see something taking off that, you know, all of our worst fears realized. Again, at the end of the day, they've got to pay for updating the septics, so it's not a quick process.
It would be an additional 2,100 square feet.
Yeah,
All right. I'd like to, I think as far as this ADU bylaw, I'd like to, Marion, you've had your hand raised, so if you have something else to add to this.
yeah, just really quick, one way to deal with it is to put in a date, units in existence prior to X date are exempt or something like that. I think it really would be, if you can figure out a way to do it, wise to limit to 1 ADU per dwelling, if there's any way you can do it.
The
Anyway,
problem is that we can't limit the protected use.
you can limit it to 1 protected use.
It is limited to one, qualifies as a protected use.
Right, and you can limit special permit ADUs in the future by, because they require a special permit, and the special permit could have as one of the conditions that no additional ADUs be added to this property.
Oh, so allowed to be built or re-permitted.
Right. Something like that. I think there's a way to do it.
Something like, because it does say, let me go back to, you know, I have to kind of switch back and forth. Sorry about this.
Sorry to prolong the discussion, but I think
This is renewable, right? You have to renew your permit every 4 years.
I think
So,
that's
I
gonna
mean-
run up against the state. Because we're treating them separately. We're not saying that the special permitted one is protected. And so the state is saying you get a protected one anyway. Even if we say you can't have it, the state's gonna say, no, no, you can.
We're saying, I think what we're saying is you can have it, but then you can't renew your special permit ADU.
But
Yeah,
it's
that
already
would be a
built.
local bylaw.
Right.
Anyway, just throwing it out there. Sorry to prolong the discussion, but
Boy, that's a mess for anybody that has an existing special permitted one.
Can that, if you got rid of apartments, going along what Rob was saying, if you got rid of the apartment section and saying that and that no more special permits, no more renewals, it automatically converted to a permittable, a protected use ADU.
Then the limit would be 900 townwide for any new ADUs.
Well, it'd be a non-conform, it would just be grandfathered in as a non-conforming one. I don't
Right.
know. It just,
But for future ones,
Right. But yes, those ones that are in existence, I think would still get a protected use one on top of the existing non-conforming one now.
okay, well,
So
Yeah,
what-
I
so
don't
what-
think-
Yeah, like the old ones don't retroactively become protected use. They were permitted separately.
okay.
So if we have a special permit ADU and they decide to build I'm calling it by right, but the protected use ADU, then the special permit ADU could expire in 4 years. If they do that, is that?
That seems, well,
I think
I
Jeannie's.
think it's obvious what we would all prefer. We would really prefer that you get one ADU per dwelling, period. And, we'd like to be able to say, oh, you can either build it by right up to 900 square feet, or go for a special permit and will allow you to increase the size to 1,200, but still be considered protected. But it seems that state law just doesn't allow that.
right, but if I can jump in, I'm sorry. I think Jim's solution works. At the end of 4 years, they have to come back with a renewal for their special permit. So the worst that can happen is that the original ADU, the special permit ADU simply gets disqualified at the end of 4 years.
that's what this is intended to, it will not be allowed or renewed
Yeah.
for anything already containing an ADU. Like that's what
Right.
if there's better language, but
Right, that's right. Okay.
So,
what
and
if
sorry.
what if we rely on protected use ADUs as our primary and have a special permit for larger protected use ADUs? So everything is protected use, but if you want to go above 900, you have to get a special permit. Oh no, because protected use is defined as under 900. Okay, never mind.
We already have existing permitted ADUs. I think we're just making ourselves. I think what you've added here is good. And at the end of the day, I don't think our worst fears are going to be realized, but
Should this say
I
any other?
Just not renewing them is a dangerous position for the town. I mean, you've said essentially, go ahead and build some very expensive building, right, for your parents to live in. And now 4 years later, sorry, you can't have that anymore. They can't live there. And in comes the lawsuit.
And the worst it'll be is again 2,100 square feet.
Right. Yeah, I mean, unfortunately, I think you're stuck with either you just have protected use ADUs by right everywhere, or you have to have this potential of having 2 ADUs on a property because you allow, a special permitted version that's not considered a protected use one. I don't think it's going to happen very often.
so Chris, your suggestion is take out that word, the renewal, because that's opening a
Right.
litigation.
I think whatever is existing now kind of has to be allowed to continue now, and the fact that somebody might throw an additional ADU on that property, so be it. You know,
Yeah.
that's what it is. Obviously, if you
have to
go the
have-
other way and you build your protected use ADU first, and then you come to the zoning board to get a special permit, they could certainly say no because you already have an existing protected use one.
Right.
You know, unless they feel it's appropriate. I mean, they might say, "Oh, you've got 900 acres of land, and you know, why not have
Right,
a little building in your backyard?"
right. I mean,
They also have to meet the septic system requirements.
Right.
Right, and if it's the other way around and they go for a special permit ADU first, thinking that later they might be able to add a protected use one, on the special permit on any new special permit ADUs, one could put in the stipulation that no additional ADUs can be added.
I don't think
Because
you
it's
can.
protected.
Okay,
No, the
Okay.
protected ones are gonna trump that.
It's a by right.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
As,
You can't put a
it's-
condition in a special permit ADU that doesn't allow them to utilize the state by right.
okay, forget it.
So again, the worst you'd have is 2,100 square feet, and if you have the area to do that and the septic capacity, then
Yeah, I mean, there might be a house that's got 20 acres, and is it the worst thing if they add another little building for staff or whatever, or rental, or you know, again, more, who knows? You know, again, it's we're worried about the worst case scenario, and I think we should. There's some really good positive stuff going on here, and I'd like
The
to make a
question
motion.
then is, do you want to put that clause 9 in at all? Or do you want to say that it'll be at the discretion of the board, or what? Right
think-
now, we've said we're not going to allow it.
Yeah, I don't think we should allow 4 special permitted ADUs on one single family home.
How are we getting four?
Well, you could do it again and again and again if this clause weren't here, right?
Or
I
doesn't
just-
our special
Yeah.
permit say only one?
It says one additional dwelling unit, but Addie May had the suggestion of making it a little bit more explicit. So this is getting a little more explicit. I want this here just because I don't want somebody adding a protected use ADU and then another special permit ADU on top of it. I think it does add some measure of protection.
It certainly gives the zoning board kind of an idea if somebody did do that.
Yeah,
You know, or if somebody comes in for a special permit, it's sort of.
it
Yeah.
solidifies the intention, and then if there's
If we find that we're running into lots of homeowners with large parcels that don't want to subdivide but want to add another building, then we'll deal with that if that comes up.
I think we should move on because
Those are-
it's been an
Yes,
hour already.
I'd like to make a motion to accept
Do-
this updated language for ADU as a new warrant article.
I'm just flashing the stuff we haven't talked about on the screen.
Yeah, I was gonna say, can you start the top and just show
Yeah.
everything be in it?
I'm a little confused where we left.
Well, we didn't go chronologically, so
No.
that was the heart of it, was the schedule of uses, but these are other related changes. So accessory buildings and uses used to say doesn't include ADUs and apartments. Let's see, an accessory use, because it's like accessory is the A in ADU, right? Accessory use is subordinate use of the building or other structure of the premises.
Steph, we actually
Sumerian-
approved these at the
Yeah,
last.
we
thing.
talked about this at the last meeting, at the last first part of
Oh.
the hearing. We approved this.
All of these.
Yes.
Yes.
Yes. Thank you.
It's just, I
really
wanted to
think
show,
we'll review that we've done this, and we had to we're just separating out some of this mix of stuff that was already discussed into a separate new warrant article to present to the select board, because the request was to separate out language relevant to ADUs as its own separate warrant article.
I think that add-on on housekeeping unit needs an adjustment. Because it wasn't replaced with apartment in 2025, it was replaced with special permit ADU?
I think it could be any ADU.
But do we need to say specifically the two set, because we've got sort of two different versions of ADU now in the definitions.
We might need to, hold on a second.
And just
So protected use ADU and special permit ADU.
copy that again and put it in there. All right, you want to keep scrolling through.
That's it. That's brings us right
Okay.
back to where we were.
All
And
right,
that's the
so,
end.
and you even you lost a page, so we're down to 2 pages, is that correct?
Yep. 3. Yes, 2 pages. Yep.
Okay, so we have our new, I don't know what number it will be, but our ADU warrant article. That I would like to make a motion to accept this warrant article and the language as amended at this hearing to present to the select board.
Do we need to change this language now?
No, that's gonna be, as I'm just writing a draft for town council, so I will check that. All we need is the content you're approving tonight. That verbiage will be just
Okay.
part of the procedure.
Okay.
It's awkward because chronologically following the zoning, we have to start with definitions. Like you said, the article bulk of it is kind of down towards the middle. And it makes more sense to start with that as the story, but then you're out of order when you're looking at your zoning bylaw chronologically.
All right, so I made a motion. Is anyone willing to second?
We have a
So-
second.
All right, so moved, seconded, Jim. All in favor? Addie Mae Weiss is an aye. Steph Harrison,
Aye.
Rob Wolf,
Aye.
Jim Garino,
Aye.
and Frank Hoke.
You're muted, Frank.
I can read lips. He said aye. All right. Okay, so we can, Steph, you've saved this. We can move on, I believe. And I guess the question is we are now moving on to continue with our warrant article, our update, zoning bylaw update warrant article.
Yes. Now, in this case, we received, we talked about it at the last meeting. We talked about having an updated figure. We now have that because it was not in the posted version. I have to make the changes live in the hearing. So I'm substituting in this revised figure, which now accounts for wall sections. I am substituting. Take a few minutes because I couldn't do this ahead of time.
All right, so I'm just gonna note that we're talking about 2 different sections here in the definition, the building height and structure, which included the average lowest finished grade. So then we also had to change the average lowest finished grade. So just so we published, we're talking about the height of building structures. It actually includes 2 different parts of the definition.
This calculation shows how taking different sections with different heights, different minimum heights, allows for a slightly different average lowest finished grade calculation. And a related change, so hold on.
So that's a plan view with the dimensions.
It's a replacement of the figure that was in there that had a plan view with the wall lengths, but it had one length for B and one length for D. And it's now been separate, B and D have been separated into two sections, B1 and D1, where B was previously 90-foot elevation. It's now one section at 95 and one section at 90. To just to demonstrate the calculation, it's the same concept we talked about. It's just an illustration of the calculation.
Okay. The dimensions represent the section of wall.
Yeah, just like they did in the prior version. Yes. So with that, I'm going to delete this note. I think also when we were doing the height of building or structure, we kind of missed this. I think we were leaving lowest in, right? We decided to call it average lowest finished grade because it is the lowest point. And so we systematically went through, and where we had struck lowest, we added it back in and changed it to section of wall, not wall section, right, Jim? So I think maybe I just missed in our discussion last time this one, so I wanted to leave that one in as well. In two locations, one is on the figure and one is in the definition of height of building structure. So I'm just going to do it. Come on.
So Steph, we're actually now not changing anything in that definition. Is that right?
Oh,
So we can strike that from the article.
that is an excellent point. And that works great for me because I can't make this graphic work. Can't get this guy to go away.
Is that right, Chris? Chris, is that correct that now this stays the
Yeah,
same?
no, right. We're no longer deleting lowest, so we can take
Okay.
that entire section off.
All right.
What is this line?
And I thought we did that, but I don't know. I'm getting it became a late night, and so
Great, even better. Then let's see if I have any more notes. We already talked about all of these things. Okay, this is where we are picking up. So we approved the schedule of use table, table of use regulations in the last section. And I don't recall doing basic requirements where we changed structure to shed,
I think that's where we left off.
shed to structure. So
that's kind of
Chris might be best on why he'd like to change the word because it's really
Yeah, this was just
all.
previously, this was added 8 or 9 years ago, I think. The exception for small sheds to get a reduced side and rear yard setback. And it's been super helpful because sometimes our setbacks are really big in this town. So it's nice to have an opportunity to put a shed a little closer to the property line. It's just strangely worded that it's very specific about sheds only, right? And yet people have all kinds of other small accessory structures that would also be beneficial to be able to have a little bit closer to the lot line that effectively act any different than a shed. You know, they a pavilion or a pergola or whatever. It's not any taller, it's not any larger. Anyway, it just seemed like this would be a nice change to be able to have it be a little more inclusive of some of the other kinds of sort of residential accessory structures that we see in town. Anyway, so that was kind of my thinking on changing this to structure.
any questions on that? It's pretty straightforward.
I mean,
Right.
you've been going language by section, I think, so this would qualify as one of those.
Would
You're
this include,
allowed to have electricity in a shed, in a structure like this?
Yes.
Okay.
could this be also considered, let's say, a small covering for an automobile?
So we say, previous version of this said that the shed shall not be used for the parking and storage of automobiles. And so we're just changing to say the structure shall not be used for the parking and storage of automobiles, which I would assume would include like a carport or one of those little, Quonset hut kind of structures that people sometimes put up to house a vehicle. I mean, I don't have any particular attachment to that language, but that's just what the old bylaw said.
But okay, I guess to the planning board then, would we want to allow a vehicle to be parked in something and have that be a little closer to the lot line?
I don't think we want to go, I think this was introduced, this was a big deal to be able to have another option for smaller structures. And I think, we've got this small accessory structure now. And we still have regular structures, and I think I think let's keep this. Let's keep this to, these are, updates. These are not necessarily changing the intent, they're adding clarity. So if we all of a sudden start talking about changing what's allowed and what's not allowed, then we're doing more than just updating language.
I think that's a slippery slope too. Is that a one-car garage? Is that a carport or a one-car garage or a three-car garage too?
Yeah, I think we already have regulations that we allow garages up to 3 spaces. They can be part of the house, they can be detached and have to meet their setbacks. I would say let's not touch that.
Well, yeah, I get that, but if we're calling it now a structure, some of these aluminum pole covers aren't necessarily considered a garage. They're a structure, not a, building in and of themselves that are made with brick or wood or well, they're not as quite as solid or large. Anyway, that was just my 2 cents.
I'm not inclined to change the intent that was pretty clearly laid out here in the bottom line. That's my inclination.
All right, so do we need to, are we at a point can we accept 4.1? Do we need to vote? I can't remember how we've got.
You've been voting every section, so that would be
Okay.
an
All right,
appropriate
so
time.
make a motion that we accept these updates as presented for section 4.1 basic requirements.
Second.
Okay, Steph seconded, moved seconded. Addie Mae Weiss is an aye. Steph Harrison,
Aye.
Rob Wolf,
I
Jim Guarino,
I,
Frank Hook.
Sure.
Okay. All right, next one. 4.2 schedule of dimensional requirements.
Yeah, we haven't even gotten to the good stuff yet.
Um,
Oh no, this is not the version. No. Okay, sorry. Is this the version that was posted? This is you posted the table or not posted the table?
I did post that table.
Okay,
Like
this is
this,
not
or-
the latest version of the table. Let me pull it. Let me pull up so we can make the right changes. To go back to last meeting's Word
I think
doc.
that one sentence had so many changes that I don't even know where we ended up.
Shoot, where is it? Oh, there it is. Okay.
Or Chris might know what the language was he wanted to have.
Well, I just,
Yeah,
I think
Steph
he's
had
said it
it.
a couple times in a
I'm
couple
looking for
different.
it right now. Hold on.
I know I have it. I know I have
Okay.
it. I just need to pull it up.
I mean, at the end of the day, I know this is gonna feel painful at town meeting, and there's not, I mean, hopefully we'll add some clarity. Hopefully advisory is able to, when we have our hearing on the 22nd, hopefully following that, and also having sat through this, advisory will be able to help write a nice narrative explaining kind of the need for some of these changes, and that they're really not hugely substantive. They're more really trying to clean things up. There's been a lot of things that are just ambiguous when people are trying to figure out what they can and can't do, and have left um, headaches for our zoning enforcement officer and building inspector, Chris Canny, over the last, I don't know, 8 years. So, yes, it's a lot. Yes, town meeting might feel long, and we've been punting these things for so long, and it's one meeting, so it's once a year, I guess. So it's important that these things happen.
Okay, Chris, does that look right to you?
Yeah, that looks like what we talked about last time.
Okay, I'm gonna close this so I don't change anything else on
Hey,
there.
did we vote on this last time? I can't remember. I
No,
know
no,
been
we've just talked about it
talked about
in
it. Yeah.
prior meetings.
Okay.
Can't see anyone.
And this is really coming directly out of a zoning board interpretation on that case on Lake Street. Sorry, no, not that one. Sorry, this is coming out of the zoning board interpretation on Farm Road, where we had the really weird fork tine, if we remember that.
Yeah.
Anyway,
So this is an attempt to match intent with language, so that we all have the same interpretation, to minimize the number of weird interpretations.
I know that in the past, the planning board has gone through attempts to try to even have the setbacks defined differently. This is really just an attempt to clarify the language that's there and not to overhaul the setback requirements.
Right.
yeah, the big thing that this is doing, I mean, just so that we understand, we allow for a certain width at the street, and then we allow for a certain width where the house goes. And in between those things, we've always required that there be a minimum 50-foot strip of land to get you between the front and the back part where you build the house. Typically, surveyors lay out the lot so that they have a block of land that meets the minimum width at the front, between the front and the setback line, right? So if it's 150-foot frontage, you end up with this sort of 150-foot wide rectangle at the front before it narrows down and goes to the back. And there's been some sort of weird versions of plans put forward where that was not done, but obviously the bylaw didn't say you had to do that. It just said you had to meet the width at these certain points, these certain lines. And anyway, so this is trying to codify what the board has previously stated they want to see on plans.
So this is 4.2, correct?
Yes, this is 4.2.
Right. And I think we've talked about this language. I think we're in a place where we can make a motion to accept this language as what we're putting forth for town meeting for our warrant article.
Are you looking for a motion or a second?
I guess I'll make a motion that this is our language that we put forth for our warrant article. Final language of course, it'll be a hearing on the 22nd with advisory that is the nature of the hearings does allow for amendments, but this is what we expect to be printed. So my motion is that we accept this language.
Second.
Seconded by Steph. Okay, so Addie Mae Weiss is aye, Steph Harrison,
Aye.
Rob Wolf,
Aye.
Jim Guarino,
I,
and Frank Hoke.
Aye.
Okay, so this one, 4.2 has been discussed and accepted, and we can move on.
Can I just ask a clarifying question? Maybe Chris is the right one. I'm not sure. When in the table where it says minimum setback, so that's the setback that it applies to the dwelling, a garage, and other structures like an ADU, but it's less than that can apply to the small structures that we've exempted.
Half
Is that
of it.
correct?
Right, so those setbacks in the table are for all structures that do not get this exemption. Or there are certain things that are not included in the definition of structure that don't have to meet setbacks. But generally speaking, yes, anything you're gonna build, house, barn, garage, swimming pool, whatever it may be, follows these minimum setbacks, unless it happens to be a small accessory structure less than 250 square feet.
Okay, thanks.
Okay. So moving on to 4.3, special requirements. Go ahead, Steph.
This one came from the ADU bylaw, and I'm trying to open a couple other things, Addie Mae, if you have the bandwidth to kick off this discussion. Sorry.
Actually, Chris may actually help on
Yes,
this
so yeah,
one.
Chris,
because
can you?
This is the one that every dwelling had to have the same amount of land as in that.
Yes,
zone.
so if we had the term principal dwelling, this would be a great place to apply it. But because we don't have the term principal dwelling, we've instead exempted ADUs, apartments, or housekeeping units from counting towards that, which is the way we've always interpreted this in the past. Previously, if you want to have more than one house on a lot, for example, like a full second house, you would need to be able to show that you have area and frontage to have two lots. You just don't necessarily actually have to do the A&R subdivision. You can keep the lots together and have like a compound of houses. And we've never included the specially permitted apartments as a quote unquote dwelling unit that would need to have its own land, because it sort of defeats the purpose of what that is and why the special permit existed. But this fix specifically deals with that. To say that, you know, we're not going to make everybody that wants to have a protected use ADU show that they have an additional acre of land and 150 feet of frontage, because obviously that's not the intent of the state law or the town bylaw.
And I think when we were moving this, Marion maybe had a comment or a question. Dwellings in this section including accessory buildings, close paren. I just feel like I'm missing, oops, I close this now. I feel like we're missing something. Dwellings are including accessory buildings. Dwellings including accessory. Oh, I think this is new language.
Oh, with approved building permit?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Marion may have stepped away, so we may lose her contribution on this.
How,
I think that deletion is great, by the way. Getting rid of that thing that said including accessory buildings. Since
That was
accessory buildings
confusing.
wouldn't normally be treated as a dwelling anyway.
all right, I came back actually.
Oh,
I don't-
great. This language, I think you had your hand up and you said we would just get to it when we get to reviewing the section.
Oh, yeah. It was, it was just a minor thing down at the near the bottom of that paragraph, the third to the bottom line. And for open space subdivisions for which a special permit has been granted, blah, blah, blah. These days, an open space subdivision does not necessarily need a special permit. It's by
But
right.
doesn't it need one for multi-dwellings?
Ah, okay. Shall not apply to multi-dwelling projects. Say for open space subdivisions. Granted. Let's see, I've got to read this whole paragraph. I'm sorry, I did step away.
Well, Marion might be right, because duplexes are allowed in open space residential subdivisions. I don't know if they need a special permit.
I'll look that up real quick.
5.6. Oh, we are,
Where's our
it should be
open space?
also 4.5. Hold on. Yeah, duplex is allowed by special permit in 4.5.
Oh, okay.
So I do think, though, it needs to say duplex or multi-dwellings. I'm not a big fan of projects.
Yeah,
Duplexes or multi-dwellings. I'm not sure.
development
presence-
or no?
Multi-dwelling buildings.
Duplex or multi-dwelling buildings. Yep, I like that. And the open space subdivision. So take away projects and put in buildings? Yeah,
Yes.
okay.
Maybe you ought to say residential, open space residential subdivisions for which a duplex has been allowed by special permit. Because there are
Residence EA require a permit for multi-dwellings?
well, the special permit is in an open space subdivision, maybe for the subdivision or maybe for the duplex. And in this sentence, it's not
Oh,
clear what the special permit was permitting. Was it the subdivision or the duplex?
All right, so that the for open space residential subdivision for which a duplex special permit has been granted.
but this is saying that the topic of the sentence is duplex or multi-dwelling buildings, right? This section shall not apply to duplex or multi-dwelling buildings. In a residence EA,
Oh, yes, you're right. You're right. Okay, I stand corrected. You're correct.
or,
Can you get rid of the 4 if you just say
yeah,
open space?
or open space residential subdivision for which a special permit has been granted pursuant to 4.5 or 5.6.
Yeah, that's okay.
Okay. Does this, it also doesn't apply to 5.7, right?
What's
Few
5.7?
things.
5.7, the open space.
No,
that's
it's
the
multi-family
mul-
overlay.
Oh, the
chap-
MOD.
Chapter 3A.
Right,
Right.
or 5.7.
No, it wouldn't. Well, you wouldn't have special permits in the 3A for duplexes.
Right. But
Right.
also these requirements do not apply to multi-dwellings in a 3A.
Would be
No,
to put it in there just to be perfectly clear.
Sure. I don't. 5.7, does this even make sense? Is this,
Yeah,
multi-dwelling buildings under the multifamily overlay bylaw? Is that the right word? I don't know.
What is that 240-5.7 say?
It's,
Chapter 3A,
it's
multifamily overlay.
overlay district. It's a multifamily overlay district.
I think
Let
that
me
looks
just say
good.
that. How is that? It's the district itself that it doesn't apply to, right?
Mhm.
Well, maybe, because there's the underlying non-MOD house that sits on, you know what I mean? It's like one of those things where you don't want to say it's in the district.
Right,
It would
it's
be
the
for a
whole
project
district.
developed within the district.
Right, because the whole district was
The
larger
district
than,
may continue to exist as a single family dwelling for who knows how long.
So what's the right term?
I think I think just add to projects developed within the multifamily overlay districts because
Or as part of, or within, under? It's
Yeah,
like,
under.
Under.
okay,
all right. Make a motion to accept the language here presented for special requirements, section 4.3 as amended for our submission for town meeting warrant article. Steph second.
Steph second, yep.
Okay. Then voting, Addie Mae Weiss, aye. Steph Harrison,
Aye.
Bob Wolf,
All right,
Jim Garino,
I,
and Frank Hoke.
Aye.
All right, moving on to 4.4 street frontage. Chris Canny, you want to just run us through this one? I think it's
Oh,
just
yeah,
cleaning
this
up.
is just a weird thing that I think was an unintended boo-boo in the existing 4.4 lot exemption. So the 4.4 lot is the special permitted frontage exemption that
Right.
lets you have a lot with only 50 feet of frontage as long as it has a very large back lot. Used to be called the back lot provision a million years ago. And so what it says is that you have to have these really great big setbacks for the portion of the property where you're going to build. And then it says that structures that are 160 gross square feet or less are exempted from having to meet those great big setbacks. And then immediately after that, it says that the planning board may by special permit authorize an accessory structure having no more than 160 square feet to be located closer to the side and rear setbacks. Well, we already exempted them, so they don't have to follow the great big setbacks. So I think that the intent here was that for structures greater than 160 square feet, the planning board was supposed to be able to grant a special permit to let the, like a barn or a garage detached, whatever it may be, to be closer than the 125-foot setback, which would make sense. Because like I said, we've already exempted structures that are worth less than 160 square feet. So anyway, this was my attempt to try to fix that.
And I believe we've talked about this as we were working on this original language. So unless there's any questions, I'm making a motion that we accept this language, 4.4 street frontage.
second,
Okay, move
Oh,
second.
can I just make one change?
Yep.
Where it says with no dwelling units, can we say like containing no dwelling units?
Okay.
And
So,
before we vote, I just wanted to look at this in context, and I was trying to do that. I'm sorry, I had a brief interruption. F5B, I just like to look at the paragraph before it. So 4.4 F5. So each building greater than 160 square feet. By special permit.
So that's the sort of continuity between the two things. We've said buildings greater than 160 square feet have to comply with these big setbacks. But then we say by special permit, we're going to let you have a building bigger than 160 square feet that doesn't meet the setback. It doesn't make sense.
But this is smaller then, right?
Right. And I think what that was meant to say was larger than. You know, I think that the word no before more is like a typo. Because we've already said that buildings 160 square feet or less don't have to meet these big setbacks.
Mhm.
Oh, I see. And they get their own.
Right. So those are the really
Okay,
big
I see,
setbacks
I see.
within each
Okay.
within each zone.
Thanks, sorry for the interruption.
Yeah.
So I think it was moved and seconded, Addie May.
okay. So moved, seconded, Addie Mae Weiss is an aye, Steph Harrison. Bob Wolf,
Aye.
Jim Guarino,
Aye.
and Frank Hoke.
Aye.
Okay. So
Okay.
4.9.
So on affordable housing, we, after subsequent discussions. Oh, you already combined the languages, Heidi, yeah?
Yes. And then we actually want to strike B.
Yep. Yeah, and I thought we talked about this at last.
It's kind of redundant because in our overlay under 5.7, if that gets adopted, it says you follow affordable housing, and then we don't want to add that does not apply when 5.7 says it does apply. So we don't want to add this statement. Right now, it doesn't exist at all in the zoning bylaw. We just want to leave it out. So it's just a cut from this. It's not a change to our zoning bylaw. It's going to be only A that we're amending.
Okay, so this is, and I just want to see if Marion happens to be around, just because I would value her input on this particular topic. This is anti-segmentation language for developments, and I just need to look at one thing.
And I thought we went through this language last Tuesday. And we had already cut that. We realized that that line anyway was leftover residual from fall comments before the
I totally don't recall having this discussion at the last hearing.
okay, maybe it's just becoming so.
And this has been reviewed by town council.
Yes.
Heidi, I believe, right?
So we're adding the word inclusionary zoning because it wasn't added, but yet frequently, if you talk to, planners or state agencies, they ask if we have an inclusionary zoning provision in our bylaws. And so we're just adding this term so that if someone was looking, because we call it our affordable housing bylaw, we don't call it inclusionary zoning, but it's known as, it's referenced, this kind of zoning is called inclusionary zoning. So we're putting that term in there just to, I guess, continue with the continued education of zoning terms.
I think it was also so if somebody wanted to like search the bylaws for that, they would find this one.
Correct.
Right.
So does anyone, I think I know we've talked about it in various planning board meetings. I thought we talked about it last week, but if we did not, basically this prevents someone from taking a property and breaking it into pieces and doing one at a time in order to avoid following the inclusionary zoning provisions of a development. By not allowing things to be phased simply to avoid those provisions. So I make a motion to accept this language to be put forth as part of our bylaw update warrant article. As
Second.
It's moved and seconded. Addie Mae Weiss says aye. Steph Harrison.
Aye.
Rob Wolf.
Aye.
Jim Garino.
I,
And Frank Hoke.
I mean,
Okay, thank you. Moving
Well,
on.
Yeah, we're not done yet. I think that was the last one in the updates. We're at the end of the updates document, so I'm going to save it.
Okay.
And hopefully floodplain is quick and easy. Oh, we have a hand up.
Dan has his hand up then, so.
Go ahead, Dan.
Thanks, Addie Mae. I may be jumping in the middle here. I actually had a comment about something that you considered last week. Don't know if that's in bounds or out of bounds, or if this is the right time, but thought I would just put that out there and see if that was appropriate to offer at some point.
I mean, we're a small group here tonight, and considering you're part of advisory, and I think, sure, shoot, what's your question or what's your comment?
Yeah, and I should say really, I'm speaking for myself here and should, identify myself as Dan Sickle from 116 Lake Street. So this concerns the sign article, which I know got talked about very extensively last week. And I wasn't able to be there last week, and so apologize for perhaps covering things that were already covered. I would say I think I understand the sentiment behind the proposed change and am sympathetic to that sentiment. I got a lot of feedback from people after last week's meeting, and so based on that, just wondering, and given the length of the warrant and the items that have already been talked about tonight, if this is the right time to pursue the sign article. Couple thoughts. Seems like the language might benefit from some further work to ensure maximum clarity and that there aren't loopholes that would undermine the intent. And also, given the feedback I've heard, I think it will be very controversial. I think folks in town have very strong feelings about it on both sides. And I think it's likely to elicit a long, drawn-out fight, both at town meeting and perhaps in litigation thereafter. And I'm not sure even if that fight is won at town meeting, that it would necessarily achieve the goals given possible loopholes and potential litigation. So really just given all of that, would just raise for your consideration, whether it would be preferable to hold off on that article, and understood that this was, I'm sure, talked about extensively last week. And if the answer is we talked about it, we considered that, end of discussion. But I just, since I couldn't be here last week, just wanted to offer that observation for what it's worth.
Sure. So I know I've heard a lot myself,
I'm sure.
and I've thought a lot about it myself, and I've dug into further research, especially with, given that the discussion of signs that we brought forth was exempt signs and freedom of speech and ACLU and all sorts of legal. And I guess I guess this is, I guess without discussing the actual language that we agreed on, I think the article itself, I'm open to the planning board discussing my I'll say what my thoughts are, and then the rest of the planning board, if we want to take a few minutes to discuss this at this stage, I'm okay with that because it's definitely, so, some thoughts need to be aired out, but my feeling is a lot of thought did go into this, and there were a lot of residents who were concerned, and we have had several discussions. We've reviewed neighboring town bylaws, and we've had several discussions with our town council about what can be done. And I know I've heard people say, well, you need more time and maybe you need to do more to work on your sign bylaws. And potentially, yes, we could work on sign bylaws across the board, and that would be another section of zoning that for maybe next year's town meeting we can look at. The discussion regarding the exempt signs, which were the politically protected, political signs that are protected, free speech. We came up with a size which is not, a size restriction, which does have some benefits. And personally, I'd really like to have, I'd like to, be prepared to have, some discussion at town meeting and have it be prepared that when it gets on to this circular, no, not getting anywhere, call the question and have residents have the chance to vote. Because I think there were a lot of people who felt like we needed to do something. And so to not bring it forth, we've spent a lot of time on this issue. And it doesn't then merit taking those, those residents' considerations into account. I know, yes, there are other towns that had restrictions on length of time and they're holding, but our discussions that we've had with town council is that they are equally ripe for litigation. And yes, because they exist doesn't mean that the only thing that seems somewhat safe is to put some sort of size parameters. And so I guess as a planning board, my gut is to say we go forward with something rather than just dismissing it. But I will welcome other planning board members' thoughts on that. Steph, go ahead.
Thanks. I wanted to say two things. One is that I think we went into that discussion with really open minds and we made some really big changes. I mean, we made changes to like significant changes to the bylaw as a response from comments and discussions. And I felt really good that the discussions remained pretty civil in that setting. And so I felt like we as a planning board were being responsive to what we were hearing from both sides. And so I was, kind of pleased with that. The other thing I would add is that a lot of people, there's like a little bit of an optic thing that I'm uncomfortable with because a lot of people were saying, well, we all know why this is coming up now. And I worry that if we pull it now, after that sign has come down, it looks like it was a move to influence one property owner, which in my mind, although that property owner, that particular sign was maybe a tipping point that brought some of this into the forefront. Like to me, the objective was not to get rid of that sign, but to make sure that moving forward, we have something in place. And so I worry that there's a little bit of a weird optic if we like pull it now suddenly after that discussion, because I do think that the objectives of the warrant article are still completely valid in the future. So that's my thoughts.
Go ahead, Frank.
Yeah, I'm a bit conflicted on this, but what I will say is that allowing free speech is important, but that doesn't mean that free speech can have its own complete size. I mean, I think we have the ability and should have the ability to provide those parameters, and that's what we've done for every other sign that we have up in our town, and we have our reasons for that. So we have the parameter on the size, which by the end of our discussion last week was not contested any further, but that doesn't mean that they were necessarily acceptable of that. Not everybody was acceptable of that. They just stopped fighting, or they stopped the discussion. Then there was a comment made about lit and unlit, where that sounded like there was going to be another battle to be had. So from Dan's point, this, I think, will continue to be a circular conversation. People will keep bringing up the same points, even if the moderator tries to suggest that each person has to have a new or different point of view, that if they stand up to the mic, they could reiterate those same points again and again, so that it could end up taking quite some time and or go into another area that opens up another can of worms. So that's my concern about what's going to happen at town meeting. And yes, if somebody calls it, that would stop it. But I think there's a lot of issues here. And unless somebody steps up that that can speak authoritatively to the regulations and the law of what is allowed for free speech and where those borders can be set and how planning board can set them. If we have that from our own town council, then I feel more comfortable about going forward with that. I just haven't heard that
We
yet.
have gotten that from town council.
Okay, so
A
that's the
very
first I've
good
heard of it
guidance from town
tonight.
council. Jim, Rob,
I mean, my thought would be, again, I'm supportive of free speech, and allowing a sign that's larger than what's normally allowed, I would be, I was in favor of. I think, again, that we don't want to live in a billboard community either. And I don't know, I think what we looked at last week was reasonable in that regard.
Rob,
I'm trying to remember exactly the wording of what we approved.
Shall I share it?
please, Steph.
Yes, please. Yeah. The I don't know. I guess I'm okay with some kind of, what seems to be a reasonable restriction on lighting and size. The thing that's a little weird is throwing the whole flag thing in there, in that, like, I believe where we define a sign, we talk about flags that have commercial or advertising purpose. So as far as I'm concerned, an American flag or a Brazilian flag, or, sort of, God forbid, a, Confederate flag, probably aren't signs according to our definition of signs. But maybe it's arguable. But I don't know.
I guess what I don't know is.
There's all this vague stuff
Yeah.
about an emblem. Well, what the heck is an emblem? Does that mean anything at all? So I don't know. It seems kind of weird to have that one specific thing, but I don't know. I just couldn't figure out what
I mean,
that,
the call out on the United States of America flag was because you certainly have lots of people flying political flags. And so I think especially because we were discussing the unlit question and we can't really restrict someone from flying, we saw lots of "Let's Go Brandon" signs, and that could, it's like that was the thing with trying to, how do you start getting into? I think putting a size in allows something to happen, and the unlit allows something to happen without restricting free speech, and without putting our zoning enforcement officer in a situation where he's trying to define what's political versus not political versus protected versus not protected. I mean, that's on a gray area. I mean, clearly our sign bylaw that we have for most of it is referring to signs, the normal course of business signs, things that we all accept as signs. So I guess Rob, the question is what do you really feel, how do you feel about just at least allowing this to go forward as we have versus pulling it?
um, I'm okay with it going forward, but I certainly, when I listen to Dan's concerns, I do think he may be right there that this could end up turning into one of those things that has, half the people in the auditorium want to speak and visit the microphone multiple times, and we just turns into a total mess. But
I mean,
I don't think it's a terribly unreasonable restriction to add either. So
I would actually, I have a question for you, Dan. Like, it's an interesting comment that you made. I wonder if the fact that there are strong feelings on both sides, I mean, isn't this the type of thing that should be brought to a vote in a town meeting because the town is divided and the default may not be the best path forward? This is the way to determine if what we have now is the best path forward.
Sure. Is it okay if I answer that, Eddie Mae?
Of course.
Okay, sure. I guess I would just add that there are issues that are very central to the town. Like say the North Sherborn Water District, where that's an essential decision the town needs to make, and it's very important to bring that forward to a town meeting for a vote. I think there are other issues that would be very controversial, but maybe aren't essential for functioning of the town. And then the question becomes, is it worth having a big fight, which is likely quite divisive? And I might speculate that people who want to put up very, very large political signs to some extent are tossing out bait and waiting for people to take it because they would like to have that very big divisive fight. And I guess my thought would be, I think in terms of the substance, I think I'm very much in line with what I've heard everyone speak tonight. But to me, it's a matter of, is this an issue where if someone's going to toss out bait on a super controversial issue, is this one that's, is it important enough to be worth having a knockdown, drag out fight that could be very divisive in town? So that I think that's what I've been thinking about, and why, Steph, I might think, perhaps this would warrant some further thought and working through for the reasons that I suggested.
I'd like to hear Chris and Marion's thoughts. I mean, I guess Chris, if you'd start, just because you did a lot of research and looking and options, and I mean, I guess my gut says is the amount we could search and write and craft, and we would be at this same place just because of kind of the emotional charge that's happening. And that's all the more reason to just move forward. If it's voted down, it's voted down. If it's, I mean, it, you know, I think again, it's just where it is an issue that people asked the board to do something. So Chris, if you'd like to, please.
Yeah, I mean, well, first I'll sort of second what Rob was saying about the flags. I had the same read, going back and going through this a few times, that, flags that are not advertising something, or, trying to inform you of some, business practice happening on site, do not seem to meet the definition of a flag. So whether we need to specifically call out, the flag of the United States, I think we've already kind of said that those types of flags are not considered signs under the bylaw. And so maybe that's a good thing, but maybe we need to make a clear distinctions elsewhere, maybe in the definitions of signs. I also think the section that we're amending, while kind of the easiest, smallest change that we could make was to just touch this one section. It's an incredibly broad section, right? But because it covers this exempted use of, the constitutionally protected, federally protected types of signs, it includes a lot of stuff that maybe we aren't really able to address sort of all the implications of what we're doing. I mean, obviously the changes we're trying to make are really small, right? We're saying unlit and size restriction. That seems like it's probably going to be okay, right? Like, hopefully we're not shooting ourselves in the foot, but I wonder, after doing a lot of sort of back and forth and looking at other towns, where other towns have specific sections about political signage, that are treated sort of under the umbrella of like temporary signs allowed within districts. I wonder if it makes more sense to look at this on a bigger scale, right? Which I know we sort of looked at the original version of what I wrote up, did that, right? We got rid of this exemption for protected signs, and we created a category of temporary signs that included political signage. We may, I don't know. I'm sort of thinking like maybe that's a better way to approach this, and have to go back and look at all of the how we define what a sign is, all these kind of things. I feel like we're just sort of putting something out there that maybe isn't 100% ready. I don't know.
Other towns have, I mean, I've reviewed other towns, I've reviewed other states about political signs, and I've reviewed what the ACLU talks about. And yes, there are laws out there that have some restrictions, but more and more those laws are being, case law is striking those down. So I just think we could put a lot of work in, and I mean, already town council has advised us that political signs to restrict timing, to restrict, that would not be recommended. That yes, it might be in existence in some neighboring towns, and the AGA, Attorney General's office may have approved, but most likely approved with recommendation or cautionary that they might
Right.
not.
I'm not saying that we try to do any regulation beyond what we're trying to do here, lighting and size, but instead of applying it to this broad category of like all types of exempted signage, that we focus it into something that is specific to what we're really talking about, right? Because we don't want to like accidentally impose a bunch of restrictions on stuff that isn't necessarily the sort of political signage that I think we're all thinking about here, yard signs and sort of banners and things like that, that people might have up related to, elections or whatever. I don't know. So I'm of two minds about it. It's like on its face, it looks like it's such a tiny change. How can we argue with like lighting and size? It's right. What's the problem? But at the same time, I can certainly see how maybe it extends into something we're not anticipating. And so maybe it would make more sense to try to focus it into something that's more specifically aimed at the types of signs that we're having issue with. And so if that means that we have to postpone this change to like, maybe there'll be a fall town meeting, put it on a fall town meeting if that makes more
I'm
sense.
just trying
I
to
don't
think
know.
of, I mean, how you would define something if we can't define, we can't place necessarily a restriction on a political sign, the advice that we're getting from council. So I'm sorry, I'm trying to think, are we then going to run into a situation, the alternative is where we start trying to define, spell out every type of sign and exactly what it is, so that then we have a bylaw where we're trying to think of and force every possible foreseeable example and option. And it's like, how do we, I mean, the reason we called out the American flag, and it was because of the size restriction, that we've got several large American flags that are 10 by 15, and so they exceed the 32 square feet. And that was why we put that in there. And again, I guess I'm at that point where I think we really have tried to be thoughtful as a board and tried to, we had some good discussion last week. And I'd like to just, I'd like to hope that we go to town meeting. A few minutes can, a few comments can be made, and then someone calls the question, and let people just vote and be done with it. And if it passes, it passes. If it doesn't, I mean, it's like, I don't know. Marion? Sorry.
Yeah, I think you guys, meaning planning board and Chris, have done an amazing job trying to manage this. You're trying to respond to people voicing concerns in the town. We know kind of where they come from. And you're trying to be equitable, not do too much, not do too little. But it's really hard to find the balance. And I think I could see if it were a more routine and not emotionally charged argument, that for many people that it would be fine to take this little change to town meeting. But right now, having heard your hearing, and I must say, I agree with Dan and Rob. I'm concerned that right now, that emotions are high, just in general. And it's not a good time to stir this particular wasp's nest in a
Well, could
year.
we at least get it to the 22nd advisory hearing and have it be put in the advisory report? Just because I think most of town is not, they're, look at who's on here tonight.
Yeah, all the people who listen into everything, right? I know what you're
Right.
saying.
So there's a
Yeah.
lot of people who if we pull it, they will never know that this was deliberated and thought through and attempted to be addressed for so many meetings and so
No,
much.
I totally get your point. And, I hear the fatigue of having to manage all this in your voice, Eddie Mae, and I give you a lot of credit for sticking with it and trying to carry it through. But I just wouldn't like to see you get into a really impossible place in town meeting. And it wouldn't be good for the planning board, and it wouldn't be good for town meeting. And I'm not sure it wouldn't be wise to just give it a little more time and let feelings calm down and bring it back another year if you feel that you have a good solution.
Frank?
It's
I
not
just
an
put in-
emergency.
I just want to put in my last two cents worth. In my read from our hearing last week, and maybe you could re-watch that if you want to get that same sentiment. But my feeling is that the arguments and the fights were not over, and that there's still going to be more. People still weren't happy with what we proposed as of last meeting. That there's still other issues, including the lid and etc. And maybe even the size is still not the final answer for some people. I can see it being very charged and very contested argument. And I also hear your point that with all the work and with a lot of people asking, with this being the right thing to do, what if we offered this as an alternative, is that we pull together a committee of people or council of people from the town that could work together with planning board that is larger than just the planning board on this topic and issue and come back and work on this through the year so that there's
Want to have a
there's
committee
more
that
buy-in.
works. I guess if we want to have a committee that takes the entire town zoning bylaw and says they're going to review all of our signage bylaw, then maybe that makes sense. But to just address this, I mean, you know, like we've had so many conversations with town council and so many reviews of what we could do, and basically there isn't much that can be done. So the only restriction that we really could put on would be a size and the lighting potentially. So I guess I feel like there's so many, you know, again, to the point of there's a lot of important issues facing town that to try and say we're going to have a committee just prolongs an issue that's really kind of, to a small extent, a waste of everyone's efforts. And so I guess I'd rather it be put out there, people realize these are, you know, have the opportunity to learn that those are protected signs. We have rules and regs for signs that are not protected, exempt. And I don't know, I mean, the moderator and as a board, you know, when things start getting rehashed, we can control the length of time. I don't know. Steph, what do you think?
Yeah, I'm have a lot of respect for Dan and Marion's opinion. You guys have seen a lot more town meetings than I have and are a lot more are in tune with, you know, kind of the flow of them. But at the same time, I really feel sort of emotionally where Addie Mae is. And so I was just curious. Addie Mae threw out a suggestion to let it go to advisory hearing on March 22nd and see maybe that would result in some language. I mean, can the warrant be can the language be changed after that, or can or a town or an amendment could be prepared if there is a solution out there that is more bulletproof. I just would like to give people at least a chance to consider the topic and then maybe revisit after that based on the tenor of how that hearing goes. I'd hate to drop it now because I do feel like we made progress. I know, Frank, I agree with you. Not everybody was happy at the end of the day, but also like Addie Mae is saying, like council has told us there's two things we can do. These are the two things, right? So I just wonder if there's like a medium, some sort of a compromise where it could go to the advisory meeting. I know nobody likes that to be a long drawn out affair either. But just for consideration and ideas and to just to get the pulse of the discussion and not cut it out too soon.
And I guess the only other thought is, I know it's a separate warrant article. Could it be put at the end so that it?
Yes, I agree with that too.
Dan, go ahead.
Thanks. You know, I should say at the outset, really appreciate your letting me bring this up and having another discussion. I know it makes it what's already a long meeting even longer. And, you know, I really appreciate that and really appreciate the very thoughtful comments all around. I mean, on Steph's point, it could come to the public hearing. That is a place where it would be hard to sort of do editing and think about, you know, what would the ideal language be. There will certainly be sentiments expressed. My guess is that the public hearing on this would be contentious. I would do my best to manage that, but my guess is it would be contentious. And I think in a way, if it and I wouldn't even want to speculate on, you know, where advisory would land in terms of recommendation on this. Haven't talked to people about it. Don't really have a sense of that. But if it comes to town meeting, I have a hunch, again, picking up on Marion's point about what a kind of fraught time this is for so many people around a whole set of issues, including this. I have a hunch that whatever happens at town meeting, it isn't going to be the end of this. Because if this is voted down, I think there'll be a group of people who will, well, we need to come back next year and fix it. And if it's approved, there are going to be a number of people are going to say violates my constitutional rights. This is an outrage. I'm going to sue, and the issue is going to persist. So I think my thought, like Marion's, was, would this be a time to just step back, hope that maybe in a year's time, everybody's just a little bit calmer, and it would be possible to have an easier conversation about how to do this, and the best way to do it, and maybe what other elements of a signage bylaw ought to change. I mean, it sounds like the sentiment on the planning board is to go forward, and great by me. Happy to have this come up at the public hearing. But for what it's worth, my thoughts on how that might go and how town meeting might go.
Let me ask just a quick question. I don't want to prolong this conversation either, but if this warrant were put away at the very end, wouldn't also people be really upset that that happened at that point in time, that they would feel that this would be more important? So this is to Marion and to Dan as well, that if it's put at the end, they're going to say, "Oh, you put it at the end, people are going to leave, and you're trying to stack the decks here, and blah." I think it's kind of almost like a no-win situation, right? Isn't that kind of where we're going with this?
It's hard. And there's a bunch of strategery that goes into ordering articles for town meeting, and I'm not sure where people would come down on this one, with whether it's earlier or later, or where it would, with the other articles, or where it would fit.
I don't know. I haven't heard much of the arguments either for or against, only what we heard last week in the hearing, and it seemed to be pretty contentious then, or it could be. So I don't know. I might have a differing opinion now from what I initially thought, but those are all good points. It's tough. It's
Hard. It's I mean, Steph made some really good points about having gone this far. How does it look if this gets pulled now? That's a really good point, and that makes it complicated.
So there are times that I've seen on annual town meeting floor where there's been a small statement or a short statement, maybe is a better term, that says that for example, the planning board has decided to pull this at this time and gave a reason why they did that, or that if the select board or the advisory doesn't support this, that that the planning board makes a statement that they're pulling this, for further discussion, for further review, or something like that, so that it's still there present that we've gone through the process of this, but feel that there's just a and out if should we decide to go that way, and just trying to help myself make my final decision on the vote that I think we're going to have in a few moments. Do we call for a vote now, or whether we want to go forward, or how do you want to move forward with this, Addie?
I guess I'll make a motion. I guess the motion would be to withdraw the article. Is there a second?
Second.
Okay.
So if you vote for this, you're voting to not go forward with this.
Correct. So my vote is no. I'd like to go forward. So Addie Mae Weiss is no. Jim Garino?
um, I'm going to say yes.
Steph Harrison?
I trust the leaders in this room, so I'm going to say yes, but I really liked Frank's sentiment about being able to say something if the opportunity presents itself to explain this, because it really hurts to say yes right now.
Rob Wolf?
Boy, this is tough because if we're going to withdraw it, I would have preferred to withdraw it at the actual hearing, especially I assume it's now far too late to have a citizen's petition. It's like, if there are people who are, quite in favor of something like this, I would have liked to give them the opportunity to do a citizen's petition. That would naturally fall at the end of the warrant. It's kind of like the town is not taking a position.
Heidi,
I
did you
guess,
have- real
sorry.
quick, now before you vote, sorry,
Yeah,
Heidi.
I was
there's
gonna say,
something
before you finish your vote, I was gonna ask Marion, is this something that we can just, right now on the record, you voted to put this in there? Can you go to keep it in there until you get to advisory, and then, sometime in the next few weeks at one of the meetings, you vote to say at advisory, we're gonna pull it, so at least it's published in the advisory that's gonna be hearing, but then it's announced that it's not gonna be discussed because planning board has decided to withdraw it? Marion, is that an option?
Actually, I'd like to defer that to Dan. Pass the buck, as it were.
Yeah,
Yeah, so I'm not 100% sure how that works. I mean, my impression is that the select board controls the warrant. Well, certainly, let me back up. Certainly for citizens petitions, those have been withdrawn after the public hearing, where public hearing makes clear that there isn't support, and then the sponsors or the proponents withdraw it. For articles, planning board article is sponsored by the planning board, not the select board, by the planning board.
right. So select board can't withdraw it. They will only vote their opinion on it.
Right.
Whether it's supported.
So I would want to check in with either moderator or town council to be sure, but I think the planning board could withdraw it, but I would want to check with town council or the moderator to be sure of that.
Because you might want to maybe change the vote, Addie May, to say, do you want to, if we check with town council and if it's possible to keep it on the agenda and withdraw it on the day of advisory, so you don't get into the hearing, but it's on the agenda, so it showed that you worked on it. I don't know, is that an option?
I was thinking of on the annual town meeting floor that it says that it was withdrawn, so that that all the citizens hear it, not just those that attend the advisory.
I guess I'm
Well,
struggling with, because exactly, there is support for this. We haven't, there's support for this, and then there's people who want to change how it's done, but there's not, we haven't had, I guess I just would have rather just go to town meeting and just let it go up for a vote and basically limit discussion at a certain point where it just gets redundant, but.
And when I made a comment about being able to say something, I was referring to at annual town meeting, not at the advisory hearing.
Okay.
Just when I made that comment, because I do think that's the audience that that I feel like we should be reaching.
Okay, I guess you can continue your vote then. You just have Rob and Frank left.
All right, so the motion was to withdraw, to change the decision made at the last meeting. I'll vote yes.
That leaves me.
So,
And Frank's,
Okay.
so,
I gave you my scenario. If that scenario, we don't know at this moment, as we're making this vote, whether that we couldn't go to town meeting and pull it there. But that's, I would like to vote yes with respect to that. hopefully we can make some statement at town meeting about why we did that. And that's, yeah, that's my hope.
So we 4-1 to withdraw the warrant article.
And is it possible to make a statement at an advisory, at the advisory? hearing?
Glad you mentioned that, because I was just about to say, if you would like to say something at the advisory public hearing about this, absolutely fine. Happy to make space for that. There'll be a number of other planning board articles and can easily make space for some comments about this.
Right.
Can you say defer rather than withdraw? I mean, obviously, it's effectively withdrawn from this town meeting, but somehow could the language be clear that you plan to keep trying to address it in a way? I mean, basically, I think just buying yourself more time, letting the dust settle a bit, letting the smoke clear, and bringing it back at a later date would be the smart thing to do.
That's what I thought I was referring to for saying at annual town meeting, but withdrawing, the vote was to withdraw this warrant article as opposed to not going forward with this in the future.
Mhm.
Okay. All right, so moving on. So floodplain district. Steph, do you want to put up the floodplain district language?
Doing my 8 clicks to get there.
I can give a brief history here. So the floodplain district is regulated by DCR, Conservation, and we have to follow whatever the floodplain models are for various different insurance reasons. They were done last, I think it was 2014, and now there are new ones that have been updated. And these are all mandates from the state. We don't have any say in these changes for the most part. So this is all a formality. So the sections being presented, and we had to include some more changes that came in on Monday. They were finally approved, of making this all compliant with whatever the flood zones are. If you just want to scroll down slowly, people can see what the portions were. They basically all say you cannot build in a floodplain zone, and that we had something about special permits, and they said you cannot build, period. It's not even a special permit. So that had to be struck. And then there's just different zones that were some is A, AE, AH, AO, that these are terminologies within this, with the FEMA definitions that had to be added. And they suggested that we do not list the panel numbers. There's a whole list of numbers in the middle there that were struck, because by listing the panel numbers, if the panels change, we'd have to keep changing the bylaws. So we're just referring to their program, and to the date that this is effective is July 8, 2025. We're going to be whatever's on record with them.
Oh, I see. It's
Yep.
shown on the firm.
Yep.
On. Okay.
And they're requiring towns in the flooding districts that everyone gets this updated at their town meetings. And these were just address changes. They did not want the street addresses because, as we've known after COVID, a lot of offices have closed or consolidated, and they just want the agency listed, but no address information.
I'm surprised they don't want a phone number or an email.
Yeah. Yeah, and no names. So hopefully this one is going to be a very non-contentious one. Anyone have any questions on it? And Chris is also our floodplain inspector, so he will have to go out and make sure people comply.
Make a motion to accept the changes as shown on the floodplain district bylaw.
Second. So moved in second. So any further discussion? Hearing none, roll call vote to accept. Patty Mae Weiss is an aye. Steph Harrison,
Aye.
Rob Wolf,
Aye.
Jim Garino,
I,
and Frank Hoke. So I believe we've gotten through everything that was part of the posted hearing for our bylaws. So I now make a motion to close the hearing.
Can I, let me just ask something. I'm a little concerned, maybe Heidi can weigh in on this, I'm not sure. We came up with the sign thing at a hearing at our last meeting that was, and it was posted as one of the items for the hearing. So we're having a hearing tonight and we posted some items for it, and that wasn't included as one of the items under consideration. Is that problematic to pull it when we have not actually put it as something we were
We had a
considering?
continuation, and the hearing notice did have signs, I mean, all the things on the hearing notice, and that in the public packet, the hearing notice was still put.
Okay.
But there was
I-
a vote and a sense of finality.
There
on the
was a
item.
sense of finality. Yep. But as you've seen in town meeting, that when people leave and sometimes they can vote and call the question again and things have been revoted. People aren't happy when that happens, but unfortunately that has been one of the procedures allowed.
Okay.
So Rob, are you suggesting that maybe we have this vote at another time?
Well, I was just wondering if somebody is just going to object to our procedure, that's all. But
how would we revisit this?
We'd have to post another hearing if you want to make it clearer, but I guess.
no, I guess we're still in it is in the notice for this.
Yeah.
For this meeting as well. I guess I'm sorry, I read through that quickly. I thought it had been removed from the hearing notice, but no, everything is still there. So it is just a continuation. So there's no issue.
Okay.
All right.
Okay, sorry.
That's
Go
okay.
ahead.
Thanks for bringing it up. I think I made a motion to close the hearing.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Any further discussion? Hearing none. Patty Mae Weiss is an aye. Steph Harrison,
Aye.
Rob Wolf,
Aye.
Jim Garino, and Frank Hoke.
Um,
Okay. The hearing is officially closed on Tuesday, February 4th at 9:51 p.m. So thanks for that. Agenda, I believe we covered everything else on the agenda ahead of the beginning of our meeting. Is there anything else?
We have another hearing next week
Another hearing next week.
at DESA to open it.
Okay. We are opening the Odessa hearing next week, correct? So next
And that-
Tuesday.
Right.
What else is
And-
on the agenda for next week?
So what I'm planning to do is there will be a bunch of meeting minutes. I was trying not to put them on these ones because I knew it was going to take a long time. So next week will be a little more cleanup on meeting minutes and just, I think, putting our warrant articles together to see what they look like, what was our final vote. And that's all I'm going to have for next week. Anything else people want on the agenda? It's deafening.
I'm fine with hopefully what's a 5-minute meeting. Well, I guess it's posted for a 7:15 hearing opening, so we'll have
Well,
at least a 16-minute meeting at least. So,
and you've got the meeting minutes from the last hearing, which will be long, and a couple other ones, so you'll have a little
okay.
to go through. I don't think we'll get this hearing minutes done for this
Yeah.
one. And we all have to congratulate Rob on his grandchild that was born today.
Oh, wow.
Congratulations.
Congratulations, Rob.
That's right.
Oh,
The
so was it a
second-
boy or girl?
It's a boy.
Aha. So that what is it? One of each? Did I get that right?
That's right. Yeah.
About 3 years apart?
2.5-ish. Yeah.
Yeah.
Nice. Congrats.
Nice. Congrats, Rob.
Thank you.
Going back to our next meeting, I'd like to put it out there that at the beginning of every hearing, that something like an explanation of what a public hearing is and what the expectations of the all participants at the meeting are, and also some norms or rules of decorum be read. Maybe that we should adopt that as just something standard for all public hearings, even if we don't think they'll be contentious, just that we kind of have it as our set. This is how we run a public hearing.
You want to put that as one of the planning board business bullets, that we put something together and you vote on what would be the format and standard?
Sure.
Is that
Anything else? Motion to, so Frank, you're working on that statement, correct? You'll work on it.
So, okay.
You'll work on something for the language that you think is appropriate for public hearings.
Okay.
Thank you.
Rob, if you know what Mary would say at the beginning of her meetings, those norms that she would, does she have that written? Could she forward that to me and I can maybe use that as a starting point?
I can certainly mention that. Yeah. I mean, I don't know if you want. I'll just throw in my opinion that it seems kind of unnecessary to make that a formal part of the process. It kind of makes sense at town meeting because that's like a big deal, but you know, we do hearings all the time and 90% of them are not particularly contentious, but they're just a legal formality. It has to be a hearing for the following thing. I'm just kind of thinking that it wouldn't be bad to have, like, you know, sort of think about the wording of something like this, but instead of just adding it as a boilerplate thing, maybe it's just something that, you know, the chair would do, either if it's already clear at the advance that this is a particularly contentious subject, or if it starts to become contentious, they might just, you know, just kind of, you know, pause for a second and ask people to comment. I don't know, just a thought as a different way of approaching it. but I will ask her to send that to you, definitely.
Frank, maybe you can come up with, take Mary's language and just look and see if there's something that you could come up with, to, you know, 2 short sentences that just kind of set the tone, and we'll review it as a board. All right. So, anything else for discussion tonight? And hearing none, can we make a motion to adjourn the meeting?
Second.
Okay, move second, all in favor, Addie Mae Weiss, aye. Steph Harrison,
Aye.
Rob Wolf,
Aye.
Jim Garino,
I-
and Frank Hook.
Aye.
And meeting adjourned at 9:57 p.m. Thank you very much, everyone.